Welcome to the start of the Midnight Tides spoiler vlog. I will have timestamps down below where I check in after each book, so I've finished book 1, and sorry if you're hearing banging, but I want to keep reading. And they've been doing construction at my apartment complex for weeks. And you'd think it'd be done. It's like almost like 5:30. You think they'd be done for the day, but they're not, and I want to read Midnight Tide. So we're going to check in now with all of my theories and my emotions and my thoughts, and I can say out the gate, best Malazan book for me so far. Like, so much fun. I have chuckled quite a few times. There are a lot of like big things happening. I really like getting this historical view into the Malazan world. Like, this is hundreds of years, I believe, before we start with I think, well, we kind of start in House of Chains, right, for a little bit, and then it starts in Gardens of the Moon. The timeline's all over the place, we all know that, but regardless, I think this is the earliest point thus far, and I'm really liking it. And so I have, like, post-it notes to remind me of things that I wanted to talk about, because, per usual, so many things. This is one of the few works where I actually look at the character sheet at the beginning quite often in the glossary, just to, like, get my bearings, because I won't see a character for a while and be like, have I met them before? And normally the answer is yes, and I've just forgotten. But yeah, in terms of like the history, since I was talking about that and how that's really interesting to me. The prologue, per usual, fantastic. I believe this is where we see the Tist Edwar and Tist Andi like kind of clash. They first come over to this earth, and they're in a confrontation, I believe, with a different being, which I think has had repercussions. And like, there's this idea that the Warren of Shadow, I think it's Shadow. Dark, Light, and Shadow are all intertwined in some way, but there was a Warren related to the Edwar that was infected by something and is going to eventually, like we're talking thousands of years, die, is the implication that I got from that. But regardless, while fighting those things, I think while they were conquering this new world, then there was this betrayal between the Edwar and the Andi. I think the Edwar caused it. Also, there's a lot of soul taken. And one of them's name was Skarbandari Bloodeye. We'll just call him Bloodeye. And I feel like when we were with the Seng, oh gosh, names are hard, with Troll and his brothers in a different chapter, that it was kind of implied that the soul of that soul taken was chained and like basically held together. Now, lots of things could be sequestered off by the Elder Gods, but it was specifically said that the Elder Gods did this and that was the body of their god, but that the soul was somewhere else. And part of me is like, does that mean Bloodeye is maybe the crippled god? Maybe. I don't know. Because like now we know he's related to the House of Chains, but you know, in House of Chains, the book, we had this whole like discussion about there's this empty throne, and that also keeps being brought up here. And the shattered Warren that is the whirlwind in the desert on this whole other continent, right? Because we're not on that continent in this book. So that was kind of interesting, and I really like how we have this Tist Andi like kind of soul attached itself to one of our characters, so we get some perspective there, and that we're following the hierarchy, and we have kind of two different magic systems working out there. It's really interesting. And also just in general how we've seen things with the Deck of Dragons, but in the past we're using tiles for the houses, and it's really interesting how things, you know, evolve over time. And we have this Azith house, probably the first one, that is looking like it's going to fail, which has some interesting implications. I currently don't have an idea who the 5 things are that are trying to break out. I don't have a clue. I might have been able to figure it out, I'm not sure, but it's interesting, that's for sure. Are there any other things in the history section? I don't know who the Kashan are, but I think those are the people they were fighting that has infected the Warren. I just wrote that name down, and I'm unsure. But this feels like this story is kind of the beginning of this really long play for this throne that we were still discussing in House of Chains. And maybe I'm misinterpreting a bunch of stuff, but I am liking learning things. And now we've already talked about the Tist Edwar, so I'll talk about some of my characters there and what I think, because we basically so far have followed just one main family and then some of the Lethari slaves in that part of the world, and have kind of learned about the economy of the situation. I kind of knew going into this that this is about the economy of seals and how that's going to trigger a war. It felt very like, I don't know why, prequel Star Wars movie, like not in a bad way. I actually like the prequel Star Wars movies because I'm young and I grew up and I was a kid and they were made for kids. So what are you gonna do? But regardless, getting back into this, I liked kind of following the intense politics on their side of what to do when they were hunting seals too early and when their warlock king was like, they're going to pay, and then how he makes them pay, and then how the people who were on the boats, I think Trull was there, was like, that wasn't our magic, and that was a lot, like, that was extreme, and, like, being concerned, and that's how, when he gets taken with fear to this place, I forget what it's called, like the Blood Bowl or something, and that's where he learns more about the history and things like that. So there's a lot going on, lots of players, and now these three brothers are kind of sent on this quest, and one of the brothers is convinced he's the sacrifice, which maybe, I don't really like you. Because then in the middle of all of this great political stuff, if there's going to be war, maybe we just have some nice, like, brothers trying to get with his brother's betrothed energy. And then the middle brother being like, I don't like this. It's just so much family drama. Just, like, a lot. And, like, we only have interacted primarily with 4 of the brothers, and one's been, like, on his own. So it's been interesting on that front. And then, like I said, we get some of the interaction with the slaves. So Udanas and Featherwitch are the 2 main ones. And Udanas is the one with the wraith. And I think that's really cool. I like this. I love revenants being attached to people. It is a trope that I love. And I've loved how he's kind of had dreams so far, and that's kind of like helped learn about the past. I love the conversations they have. I love that he can stay hidden. And the power of the Feather Witch is interesting. And it's mainly through these perspectives that I've been relearning about all of the gods and things like that. Because I think there's a lot of gods here that have different names than they do in the future, or they are earlier incarnations of what we have in the future. So getting my bearing there. And there's a whole bunch of stuff about this white dove. I think it's a dove. I don't know if it's a raven or a dove. But there's a white bird, and it's important. And every time it's on the page, I'm like, I know I'm supposed to pay attention to you, but I don't know why. And, you know, in the 4 books I've read so far, everyone always swears by Burn. But here it's a different god. I forget the name now, but it starts with an E. So it's just... the evolution of time and how that affects religion and culture is very apparent reading this. I think that's really cool. Now we're with the more, I guess they're humans. I think they're humans, the Lestery. Lethery. Anyways, I'm pronouncing everything wrong, presumably, because I'm either pronouncing them how my brain thinks they're pronounced or how the audiobook narrator thinks they're pronounced. And I've been told many times the audiobook narrator is wrong, but it's all I have is my own brain or that and their fantasy words. So we're gonna go with it. But this is where some of my favorite characters are, okay? So, like, Bryce, Hull, and Tehol are an amazing brother thing. Like, we haven't seen them interact, but I love all 3 brothers so much. Bryce is the king's champion and way over his head politically and is really worried about both of his brothers because, I mean, if he's in over his head, Hull is like... he's drowning and doesn't know it. So he's with a contingent of people who are going to discuss trade stuff. Little do they know there's going to be this great meeting. Well, I think the great meeting is planned, but it's going to probably devolve into war. And he's with this girl, Saren, and she's cool. I like Saren and Hull, and learning about Hull and how he was kind of used to make a lot of the indigenous people kind of give up or... I don't make bad deals, so now they really aren't like a shadow of what they used to be, and how he feels really bad about that, and how he has this weight on his shoulder, and so he has his own reasons for maybe wanting war, but he's this wild card right now. So like his brother Bryce is like really worried that he's going to be killed or something, and like because no one knows if they want or don't want a war on the Lethery side. There's a lot of moving parts in the royalty, and I'm not going to get into the royalty. There's a lot going on. It's your kind of typical, like, backstabby royalty group, right? And with, like, a prince who really shouldn't be prince or doesn't really know what they're doing. But Tehol, okay. Tehol and Bugs are the best freaking thing I've ever read. When you meet them and Bugs is knitting some pants, and that whole discussion just sticks with me. And how brilliant he is, and his planning. Like, oh, I haven't liked a character planning this month in a really long time. Like, classic. So good. And I love all of his interactions. Other characters I really like, we have the 2 undead people. One's a little girl. I think her name's Kittle. But then the other one used to be a thief and is going to be on retainer for Tehol. And... that's how we learned about the ads that not doing well. But, like, I like those whole undead things. And then we've got... what is it? Gurren Ebericht? Who is also a big player in all of this. He basically is someone who can kill anyone he wants but royalty, right? And so Tehol really wants to bring him down a peg before he ends up on that dude's list, and he's going to end up at the meeting where Hull is, so he's going to be important. And, like, when you first meet him, he's betting on this guy because there's this rule in this justice system, right, where you have to, like, pay your debts or carry your debt across the river and not drown, and then you're good. Which is funny. If you're a woman, it's only half. So they're considerate about biological limitations, I guess. Regardless, he bet on this person who had a huge fine who everyone thought wouldn't make it. And he does, and actually Tehol has these women he's working for hire him, and these women are also a trip. Just, the moments are so self-aware of their humor. It reminds me of, like, Terry Pratchett stuff. Like, when I read these scenes with Tehol and Bugs and these women, and then the guy's name was Ablala Pooney or Puri. I can't read my own handwriting, apparently. So, strong start. Extremely strong start. I know exactly how messy everything is. I don't know where the dominoes are going to fall. I'm intrigued by the global world building that always exists, but also really intrigued by the, like, narrow plot focus of where I'm at. And I just think this is the best thing I have read by Steven Erikson so far, and I am excited to keep going. It's been a minute, but I finally finished part 2, and before people go typing away, I know in the first part I talked a lot about thinking this was really far in the past. And someone has commented on one of my videos to say that it wasn't, which, like, I don't think that actually was very apparent until this part, and even then there's only, like, one key moment that I think actually helps me put it in a timeline. So I don't dislike that someone pointed it out to me, but this, unlike other books, doesn't have the sleep burn times at the beginning of chapters, so it wasn't very clear to me. But I still hold that everything I've been seeing is really cool, how there are consistencies across countries and continents, like we have decks over here and tiles over there, and I don't know, a lot of cohesiveness in the creationist origin mythologies that are happening, which I think makes sense because that stuff like that kind of happens in our real world, which I think you can kind of see Erikson's love of archaeology and history and stuff there. I still really appreciate everything I said in the first part, but I recognize that this is not super far in the past. But I always knew it was in the past because Charles Sengar is in House of Chains in a very different position than he is this book, and I guess I don't have a good sense of how long the Tistador live. To me, they seem like very long-lived people, but I don't think I've ever been told in the book so far how long their lifespans are. We don't need to answer that question, but I think that's why I wasn't sure if this was like 100 years ago or whatever. I think now, based off, like I said, one moment, I don't really feel like I've been given other breadcrumbs. This is after Memories of Ice, I think, besides the prologue, which is very far in the past, like all the flashbacks. But I think, based off a reading that happened with the tiles, there was a reference to the Beast Hold and how it has 2 wolves, and that seems to reference how we have the 2 wolves for the Soul Taken and the other shapeshifters in that warren. So that's another cool thing. I like that there are holds here and there are warrens there, but they're the same thing. I don't know. I like that. So just before everyone's ferociously typing away to correct me, I understand that I'm wrong, and I will continue to be wrong as I speculate and have fun forming my own incorrect connections and things like that. So, things have happened. Ooh. So I think I'm going to talk about stuff that happened with the Tistador, and then I'm going to go back to the Lethery, because although they're connected, they're still kind of contained groups of individuals, and then musings on gods and history based off what little tidbits and confusing flashback scenes we have gotten in this section. So things escalated a lot with the Tistador. Like, we learned from Bryce with the Lethery that the Warlock seems to have his powers through this forgotten god, and it's unclear, I think, whether this is someone we have met before and know of, or if it's just this other force of nature that we just don't have a name for. It's just one of the many forgotten that he has chained. But also, part of me is like, but could it have been the crippled god? Because we learn in this section that he made a deal with the crippled god, and that deal kind of got rescinded and transferred to another party, Troll's younger brother, which I can't remember his name. It starts with an R, and I've listened to it and I've read it many times, but it does not stick with me. Rudahel or something? I don't know. Regardless, that little turd has been promoted and has gone through a lot. Like, I don't know. He's just a very he's a man who's been told his whole life that he needs to accomplish great things, but has not been given the opportunity to accomplish great things because this has been a time of peace. And so, when given the opportunity to come back to life and serve the cripple god, he didn't even really think twice, honestly. It just kind of happened. So now he's the emperor. So, there was a very fitting ending to this part to be like, oh, the Tistador are now in different management. We have a new direction. We have a new mission statement. We're going that way. So, yeah, although it seemed like there was going to be like a contentious piece with the warlock in charge, that doesn't it's foreshadowed that this will not be the case maybe in the future. And getting to that sword and that whole thing where we're very far north into the ice and how we are introduced to this different group of soul taken that can be wolves was really interesting. It was really I really liked the scene with Charles Sengar having to, lead these people away, get lost in the storm, and keep fighting them over and over again. I felt as lost and disconnected as he did. I thought that was actually a really well-crafted scene. And I was actually kind of bummed for a second that his brother died, but I should have realized, his brother's not dead. He's holding this magical sword, there's been some implications that maybe this sword is related to the daughters that the Tistador seem to care about, who I think the daughters are these sisters of Mother Dark, who I think it's related to Anomander Rake and other people, I think. I don't know. It seems like a very complicated family tree with Mother Dark. I don't know. But it was a whole thing. Another reason why I just really don't like this younger brother who's now Emperor is he was like, now Fear, give me your wife. And it's just like, come on, guys. This is so childish. You are such a child. And I get it. It's actually a very relatable character, even though he's of a race of beings that I could never relate to on a planet that doesn't exist, it's this whole thing. So I think a well-crafted character, especially in the short amount of time I've been with him. And I did feel bad when he got brought back to life and the gold coins were on him and the wax, and it was a lot. And I was glad Udanas was there. Udanas is also really fun to be with because he got a cool flashback scene. And I don't know, his musings are just the most interesting to me. I think of all of the quotes that I just outlined for thematic musings, or just I like how this sounded, are usually when he is thinking and engaging with thoughts and stuff like that. That's another thing in this section with the crippled god, which I think kind of came up. Was it Memories of Ice or House of Chains where we had a more direct conversation with him? I can't remember. I think it was Memories of Ice where we had another person talking to the crippled god where, he kind of just wants chaos. And peace is not conducive for that for him, but he argues it in a way being but peace isn't good for you either. Peace is stagnation. And you see a lot of characters grappling with their relationship with the status quo sort of thing, which is essentially what the cripple god's against, but his methods are questionable at best. I'm not convinced he's the good guy, but I do see how this is a very manipulative talking point and how it could work to bring people over. So that's mainly what's happened over there. I've also loved conversations between Saren and Hull. He's just a grumpy dark guy, and she's just she wants to fix him. I don't know, there's something about it. I don't think we're gonna get a lot from that, and she's, kind of just our window into this moment from kind of the Lethery side into the Tistador camp, and I like her being there. I think she's a really nice level-headed viewpoint. And when the actual Lethery people came, the spoiled prince. So spoiled. So spoiled. And then we're with the Lethery, and it's tonally so different. It's just banter off the walls, really corny, campy, funny banter that I smile at. I'm just okay, you know exactly what you're doing here. There are some things that don't land as well for me as humor can be. There's just some moments where I'm just I don't know what sexual consent is right now. Because one of the undead characters I guess has a need for sex now because of an implant or something, a creature that's merged with her. And we have this guy who was the bodyguard that I talked about in the previous section, who has a really big dick, and people seem to like that about him, and he feels bad that people are just using him, and Tehol has no sympathy. And I just thought that Tehol, I get where you're coming from, but that's kind of a jerk thing to say, and Bugs agreed with me. It's just don't know if I love this side of you, but it's a human side, so I guess, I don't know. So there were some moments there that didn't quite land for me, but the conversation with Bryce and Tehol was awesome. When Bryce is I don't know how to maneuver this. People are wanting to use me. I just want to protect the king. And he's just don't say anything. Just smile. They'll think you know everything. And he's but I don't. It's that's not the point. So I do like that brother relationship. I like all of the plans that are afoot. I think I smile and chuckle the most in this section, even though, like I said, not everything lands for me. I also just think magic-wise, the tower is now dead. That's what we learned from Kettle. And, the fact that you can have undead beings and what is the maintenance of that, kind of going into that was not something I think I've ever gone through in a book, and that's been interesting. So yeah, that's been the Lethery section. And so gods and stuff. So I think the most interesting thing for me was with Udanas's backstory. We saw Orsek, who was in House of Chains. I think that's when I first met him, who I think he's like, there's Tist folk who care about the Son of the Light or something, and I think that's him. Like, regardless, he was related to one of our characters in House of Chains, and I think with his scene we saw, like, maybe dinosaurs or something. It's hard for me to remember. But he's here, and he was talking about a conversation he had with Anamander Rake, and they talked again about the Skabendari, and how he had escaped one thing, but couldn't come to another thing because he was otherwise trapped. And so this, like, I feel like I said in the last section that I was wondering if this was another name for the crippled god in the past. And I'm still not sure. I'm not positive. But it could happen. It's a possibility. Things are maybe unclear, but for sure this whole section kind of implies what might be in the Azeth house. I also think it was really interesting that it was implied that Anamander Rake and maybe the other people with him on the Moonspawn, but maybe specifically only him and people like him of the dragon's soul taken, are not Tistandi, despite what he says, which I think is interesting, because up to this point, that's what I've assumed he is. So learning more, and we kind of also had with Feather Witch's tile reading, there's the Dragon House, which I think up to this point I hadn't known there was one. And with this flashback and that reading, it's like, okay, so there is a whole group of people, and they all seem to be children of Mother Dark. And it makes sense, because we've seen a lot of Dragon Soul taken, although I feel like we've seen some that were Talana Mas, but I don't know. But that was when she was discussing the Empty Throne and the Beast Throne having two wolves. That's when I was like, okay. So I think now, in terms of the cosmic timeline, we are after a lot of the events in Memories of Ice. Like, maybe not at the end of the book, but, you know, the point where Tak the Younger becomes one of the holders of that house. Or maybe not Tak the Younger, but, you know, Tak the Younger had a wolf in him for a while, and because now I think he's a part of, like, he was reborn into a person, and yeah. We all know. It's confusing. It's all over the place. Lots of regeneration and rebirth and renewal. But I am having a good time. This one for sure I think is the easiest for me to blow through. Like, it took me a while to get back into it, but I just read the entirety of part 2 in like 12 hours. So I don't know if I'll keep that pace up, but I am invested. Okay, different location than normal because I cannot be in my normal location, but I am basically binging out the rest of this book, so I wanted to check in after part 3, and this is, you know, where the war begins. I wasn't surprised with what we went into here. There's definitely a lot less lore stuff, but I still have a lot of questions, and I thought this was a very, I don't know if it's very different, but these war battle scenes have not been as drawn out as how they were in, say, like Deadhouse Gates, which I think I appreciated, but also these are always, for me, the least interesting parts of most military fantasy or sci-fi books because I'm not good at keeping track of where the things are, but I liked how the information was given to us about when certain places surrendered or fell, and basically the momentum of battle, I think, was really well described for me. I was really happy that Hole had told the Tistador, hey, they're probably going to, like, commit huge war crimes and destroy all your villages, because that was like kind of rough to read, but it was nice to know that they were able to get out, and generally just how sorcery was used. And then we saw with the Tistador, we already knew they had these wraiths, which are basically bound Tistandi, who are forced to serve these people who betrayed them, at least their ancestors. And then we also learned about demons this time, and how, I mean, I guess maybe the definition of a demon is just a being from another plane. I don't know if they're an actual, like, breed, because we actually learned that this type had a name, and the one we met was just like a fisherman who fishes for dangerous fish. But that was interesting. So the battle with the magic front was kind of cool, because I feel like, not since Gardens of the Moon, I think, well, and I guess End of Memories of Ice, I hadn't seen as much magic, because normally the magic negates, or like in Memories of Ice, magic was really nerfed by the crippled god. So Lethery, though, things are not going as they thought they would, and the Lethery are definitely like a very on-the-nose metaphor for at least my interpretation of United States history in terms of, you know, manifest destiny, and we must like assimilate all of these cultures and things like that. So that was really apparent, and, you know, the Queen and Prince aren't in a good place, but I don't like them anyways. Also, it's the Narek and the Tarthanol, their gods are waking up, and I think now I have a better sense of the vast diversity of gods and spirits and the magic associated with that was, I believe, introduced more strongly in Deadhouse Gates, but I was like, I don't know what's happening with like the Wiccan gods and things like that. Like there were battle scenes there that I think involved spirits and undead, and I was unprepared, and since then we've had that more often, and so here I'm feeling more comfortable with that part of the world, and so statues are heating up. We had the Narek that weren't destroyed by the sorcery. So that's cool. So the war is happening, and then our characters are doing some stuff. A lot of the cool world building stuff for me is still in the Lethery section, and we have the Azeth Tower that was dead, and now Kettle's coming to life. The undead are becoming more corporeal and are able to go on this cool like heist thing with I think her name's Shark. I can't really pronounce her name, to go get information. Like, and there's this implication that this Azeth Tower that died is becoming the Hold of Death, which was interesting that in the Lethery they never had a tile for the Hold of Death, because we know in the Deck of Dragons, I associate Hood as, the House of Death. So I'm wondering if this is related to that or if it's a different hold, and we've been told the dragon holds are waking up. There have been a lot more dragons in this book, and understanding the difference or maybe similarities between dragon and soul takens who have forms of dragons. I'm not sure if they're the same or different yet. We had that implication last section how Anomandarake is not Tistandi like he says he is, and we know he is one of the soul taken who become draconic in his form. We also are introduced to this rat guild. And there was some throughout this whole section there's a lot of discussion about society needs to change, and how do we change society to benefit all and not need a lower value caste system sort of thing. And so there's a lot of discussion about that from both the Tistador and the Lethery side. And in the Lethery side there was comparing it to rats and how Bugs needs to be the leader, and Bugs. There is more to Bugs than meets the eye. You kind of feel that the whole book, but here especially I'm like, how do you know things? Like, he's handling monsters that are escaping burrows. He seems to have a lot of information. I think there was an offhanded joke about thousands of years. Like, I don't know how old he is now. And I don't know why he knows the things he knows. He's for sure, for me, one of the most interesting characters in this, especially since he's an interesting character in Malazan that gets point of views. Normally, the larger-than-life people, you see them through other eyes. So I really like Bugs. So there's also this seventh closure that was brought up by the King's mage sort of thing, I forget his name, that was talking to Bryce. And I don't know what this prophecy is, but it keeps referencing the First Empire, which has also been mentioned, I think, in Deadhouse Gates and maybe House of Chains. And I can't wait for the whole history of all the things to kind of fall into place for me, or once I finish the whole series to go find a wiki where someone has done the work to connect all the dots. And back to the Tistador, we got the Emperor, who is getting into being an emperor, and he's bad at it. Partially he has voices in his head from the crippled god, and he's in over his head, but he's also very abusive to his new wife, who he forced to marry him. But also you kind of feel for him, because when he died, no one thought he was dead for more than a minute, right? He came back to life because he's not allowed to stay dead, which is you can feel empathy for this really, really bad, really on the edge empire. And I like at least that he has Udanas, and Udanas's perspective has always been really interesting. I was kind of shocked that Featherwitch betrayed him and was he's possessed, but also it was kind of funny how still people didn't catch it, because I think the wraith that Radal thinks is connected to him was unbound and was oh, I see what's happening here, but I won't tell. So now Udanas is the only person that the Emperor trusts, and he's the Emperor's slave. And the Emperor is talking about kind of ending slavery, but also he doesn't want to end it for his slave, because then his slave would run away. But then I think Udanas has this moment where he's well, actually, I do want to support this person. He needs a friend. It's a very interesting relationship, interested to see how that unfolds. And then Saren gets to meet the Crimson Guard, which I don't think we've met yet. I know there are other Malazan world books that have the Crimson Guard, I think. I think there's a book called The Crimson Guard, if I'm not mistaken. But Iron Bars and her meet, and Iron Bars saves her life a couple times because she basically does not respond well to someone she'd worked for forever committing suicide, which, yeah. And she also got to witness her people doing atrocious war crimes, so yeah. But I like that this Crimson Guard part is connecting us to the other continents that we've been on, referencing, you know, the Emperor, who is now, like, in the Deck of Shadows. But also it's, like, different because it seems like they want to help the person that person stole a throne from. So I don't know a lot about that lore, but it's interesting being, you know, reconnected to Warrens again and stuff like that. And I think the last scene we've seen with them is a pretty brutal scene where they are, in their heads, rectifying a wrong by killing these people who have been raping and killing other people. It's just a lot of violence and gore in this section. One of the last really interesting things for me is I think this person is one of the 3 daughters. I could be wrong. Her name is Sandalath Ju Kurlat or something, and we have heard about her before. And when they were traveling through the Warrens, she's like, I'll help you guys. Like, that's not a big deal. Would you mind, like, throwing my ring back into the sea? And I don't think she expected this to happen, but by doing that, she kind of comes back to life, just to be snatched up by the cripple god and be given as a friend to Withal, who's been praying to the sea god, and I wonder if something's going to happen there. And a thing I have learned, I've been wondering off and on in this vlog if Scambadari Blood, or whatever his name is, was the crippled god, and we find out pretty definitively he's not, because the crippled god is, like, real mean to the Emperor and is like, your history's so messed up anyways, you don't even remember your history appropriately, which is also a huge theme in the section about how people purposefully don't remember their history appropriately because it doesn't match the vision of what they think their mission statement is, essentially, you know, their culture, their destiny, and things like that. There are also lots of interesting comparisons between the Letherii and the Tistador in terms of, like, which one's more traditionalist and conservative and which one thinks of themselves as the culture of progress. And there was something funny, though, because so the Letherii just conquer and absorb and change. Like, that's what they do. And there was a group that I think were the Tist-Andi, but they didn't call themselves that, who had horses, and the Letherii aren't good at horses, and they had learned from these people, and these people purposefully made them bad saddles. I thought that was so funny. But yeah, those are my thoughts on this section. Excited to see what part 4 is going to be, what is the payoff of this story. Like, I don't know what we're going towards. Like, right now, it really seems like the Tistador have things in hand. I don't know what's going to change the tide. Like, we have these mysteries. Like, what is happening with the undead? Why did so many people get killed every year? We learned how many people are killed every year, and it's an astronomical number, and it's kind of disturbing. What's going to escape from these burrows? Like, yes, we have this war on the surface, but in reality, we have, like, supernatural stuff that's going to hit the fan, and how are we going to handle that? So, excited for probably a very explosive ending, and getting into that. Well, that was an ending. Oh my goodness, so many cool things happened. So first off, I was kind of mentioning in the last section, you know, Bugs, more to him than meets the eye. That was very clearly telegraphed. I don't think I expected him to be an elder god. That was awesome. And I need to look back into my other books because I know we've had this elder god mentioned before, but I don't remember the context. Like, for some reason, I'm associating it with water, like Mael, M-A-E-L, but I'm not sure if it's that or if it's shadow or illusion. Like, I get them all mixed up. But regardless, he's an elder god, and that was awesome. And the way it came out was just, when Tehol was being beaten down, and we just had the death of Hull Biddick, and it was just, it was pretty great. So that was something I loved, and I loved that the end of the book is him going to presumably beat up the crippled god, which obviously doesn't have, like, lasting side effects, because I still think this takes place before the House of Chains is in the deck. But that's still funny to me. I chuckled. And that's, like, a thing I've really liked this whole book, and I finally can, I think, put my finger on it, is I've liked the tonal humor, like, coupled with the reflective musings. Like, I think that's been done really well, and it's been a good balance, so it's kind of been split between the Tistador and the Letherii, where we're like, when we're at the Letherii, it's almost Terry Pratchett style. Like, it's just like, this is hysterical, bonkers dialogue. And when we're with the Tistador, it's more, you know, musings on capitalism and empire and freedom and what does that mean, etc. So I think that balance was done really well, and why I could read this book, like, in a more bingeable fashion than other Malazan books. But now we need to talk about some of the brothers, because lots of things happened with the brothers. I mean, I already talked about Halbidic, who's dying on going to see Tehol. And Tehol's still fine, because the end of the book is basically Tehol and Bugs doing Pinky and the Brain take over the world nonsense. Gosh, they're a great duo. I really like them, and I like that Bugs is staying with Tehol, even though, like, Bugs is obviously a part of the Pantheon and, like, should be doing things. It's great. But Bryce finds out this one dude's the Errant, which I don't know what his, like, powers are, but he seems to direct things. He reminded me of, who was the god in Gardens of the Moon? Like, the two gods, like the flip of the coin. Like, it's not that aspect, but it reminded me of those powers of kind of just generally guiding things, but not having a lot of actual direct control. And so that was an interesting, fun reveal. But then when Bryce had to duel Rulad, I always forget how to say his name. Yeah, Rulad. And he's so smart because he listened to Sita and didn't kill him and just, like, did all these things to make sure he just couldn't move and couldn't die, because if Rulad can't die, he can't heal. And then he drinks the wine and dies, which, like, I kind of already knew that the king was dead, because, like, it made sense that he was going to do that. And then this king's never been a very likable person, but then he still lets this dude go fight for him, even though he's dead, and then Bryce dies. But, I mean, is he dead? He now is in a different part of the world with a different, like, meaning to things. And I'm glad that his memories could be put in Tehol so that we have the memories of these gods that weren't forgotten. The capturing of this one spirit was cool. This whole section was basically gods are waking up, and so then you also have to think, what's the definition of a god? Like, so is anything that's just super powerful a god? That seems to be it, and then, like, it's just, like, layers of power. Because in this Azath house that's dying, we just have the gods of the Jek, we just have the gods of the, I can't remember their name, but just the Toblakai, that Ublala, I can't say his name. The undead woman's boyfriend had to go fight. And I mean, and meanwhile, just Iron, what's his name? He's in the Crimson Garden. Iron something? Can't remember his name, but he's just, fighting all of these things, like the lizard cats, which were the Jek people, and then the Toblakai, and then we have the Tistandi god showing up, and Fear's going on a mission to go find the Tistadur god. So just a lot of gods. And we captured one with the Jaghut powers, and it seems to be implying that, like, a lot of this is caused because there's this thawing of this one Jaghut's original power, which I do think we saw in the prologue. But I still haven't, like, fit it all together, but it was, like, pretty fun. Like, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed a lot of that, and how Fear is now inadvertently traveling with the Tistandi god to go find the Tistadur god. And I don't know if we'll get to see on page how that pans out, but that seems pretty great to me. Also, learning that Saren Pedekt is actually kind of sort of, like, just has this affinity to this Warren and has been kind of using it, and then she got trained by someone in the Crimson Guard, and suddenly we're like, we got an info dump. We got an info dump about how, like, the Warrens and Holds sort of work. I was so excited. So, I mean, like, whether it's a 100% true, I guess I don't know, but I felt validated in a lot of my thoughts and was just excited to learn because I am a geek. I love learning about how the magic works. What other things do I want to talk about? Some heavy moments that really stuck out to me and I thought were executed really well was the idea of sorcery as these weapons of mass destruction, especially when there's no counterbalance, which typically up to this point, sorcery has been negated or balanced to the point where it's still boots on the ground, very kind of standard balanced warfare. And in this case, we have not had a fair battle pretty much the entire book. It's literally just been magical destruction on both sides, whether it was the warlock or it was not Sita directly, but his people. And I thought that the visualization of it and the feelings about it on both sides, like even Rulad, who was, he didn't want the destruction, the warlock did. And I thought that was really striking. And the fact that Rulad somehow is the Empire. I guess I didn't have, like, a scenario that I wanted to win, right? Like, I have this really bad Leathery king, and I have this kind of unstable, possessed, sword-wielding, undead Rulad, and, like, which one do we want? So Rulad's currently on the throne, and that should be something. So we have Rulad on the throne, we have Tehol and Bugs just, like, going to secretly take over the world in the background. That's just my own headcanon. I know they're probably just, messing with the economy, which is kind of the same as taking over the world if you think about it. So I like where things have left off. I was really happy with this book. I don't think I have other notes I wanted to talk about. I was really happy with the reveals and how things landed and settled, and I need to figure out, I can't decide if it'll spoil me or not, but I wanted to figure out concretely where this book fits in with other things, but I don't know if that would spoil me for other books, if I should just wait. It's not that big a deal to wait. And per usual though, if you made it this far in the video and you want to chat about this book with me, that's awesome, but don't spoil other books unless it is directly written on the pages within the first 5 books. It's a spoiler for me, because I have a lot of fun doing the world building and timeline put together stuff. That's part of the fun puzzle of Malazan for myself. And sorry if I pronounced anything wrong, because I listened to the audiobook and I think he pronounces everything wrong. But that's it for this video. If you just want me to know you're here, leave a wave, because Midnight Tides, I still don't, like, I feel sometimes really dumb when I don't understand metaphors. I'm like, this midnight tide means something. And, like, I know it had to do with the Tistador and, like, changes happening after the midnight tides, but I do not know what that means. I, like, just know it was referenced. So sometimes I feel dumb reading these books, but it's okay, because there's enough cool stuff to balance it out. But yeah, leave waves if you just want me to know you're here and you don't want to, like, just leave a comment. Thank you if you did watch it all the way through. You guys are always such a great, like, place and community to chat with these really lengthy, convoluted, intricate books. And yeah, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.